Tilly hadn't properly believed in the war up until now, although she had already decided she would be a nurse, and Rosie, who knew Morse code, wanted to work in intelligence. She'd taught Tilly the code for SOS. Dit dit dit, da da da, dit dit dit. But what use was cleaning wounds and breaking codes if all the pets were going to be killed? We have to stop them, Tilly told herself as she ran round to Rosie's house, Bonnie lopping at her side. She couldn't help wondering about Tinkerbell, but then she told herself after everything Rosie had been through, surely Megan wouldn't want to upset her by getting rid of her darling pet. But she knew the minute the door opened and she saw Rosie's white face, her small frame trembling as she gripped the handle for support. Megan's putting Tinkerbell down tomorrow, whispered Rosie, looking over her shoulder. What about Bonnie? Same, said Tilly. Did you hear that gun go off? Rosie nodded. What was it? Ted Bow shot his greyhound. Rosie stifled a sob and then pulled Tilly in through the front door, calling out, It's only Tilly, we're going to play in my room. They ran upstairs, and once in the bedroom with the door closed, Rosie dropped onto the bed, where Tinkerbell was pawing away at the eiderdown. Bonnie settled herself on the floor, nose resting on her paws, eyes fixed on Tilly. What are we going to do? Cried out Rosie in a loud whisper. They can't kill our pets. They just can't. Tilly shook her head. I know, it's unbelievable. I told Dad he was cruel. I had hysterics and Donald had to calm me down, but Megan just sat there buttering the bread for tea. How can she not care? Mummy and Daddy would never have said such a terrible thing. Her voice broke into a sob. Tilly put her arm around her friend and, for a few moments, all they could do was sob and clutch each other. Then Tilly pulled herself upright and swept back her long hair from her forehead. She started to pace up and down the room, hands on her hips. I don't care what the grown-ups think, she said. They're just plain wrong. Absolutely, hiccuped Rosie through her tears. But what can we do? We come up with a plan. That is our war too. This is our war too. We'll have to think of something before the morning. Well, we can try, I suppose. There was silence for a few moments, and then Tilly said, What about asking one of the other children if they could take Tinkerbell and Bonnie? Why would they? The same thing's going to happen to them. Donald says the war will start by the weekend and bombs could drop straight away. The grown-ups think the dogs will go mad and run around biting everyone. I would never let Bonnie do that, said Tilly in a shocked voice. Of course not, but the grown-ups won't listen. Megan goes on and on about food and how there'll be rationing and there won't be any spare for pets. But Donald's a butcher. He could always get something for Tinks, couldn't he? Maybe you could save a bit for Bonnie. Of course, said Rosie. Food's not the problem right now. It's saving our pets from instant death. They sat in silence for a bit, both thinking hard, and then Rosie said, If only we could hide them. Good idea, but where? Your garden shed? No, said Tilly, still pacing up and down. Bonnie would howl if she was locked up all night, and Dad would hear. It'd have to be somewhere further away, where no one would hear them. But how would we hide them for weeks and weeks? You mean months? The war won't be over in weeks. Tilly nodded. They thought the last war would be over by Christmas, and it went on for 4 years. My dad thinks he'll end up in the trenches again. Donald's okay with his one leg shorter than the other. The army wouldn't even take him last time. But it's not that my dad's scared of going to war. He's not a coward, said Tilly, raising her voice. No, of course not. It's just, well, he's seen things. Donald talks about it a bit, what his older brother told him before he was killed. There was a pause, and then Rosie murmured, I don't know what a bomb sounds like, do you? Tilly shook her head. Mum looks very frightened these days whenever they talk about the war. She didn't add that she felt quite scared at the thought of a bomb dropping on their house. Would their shelter really be able to keep them safe? Tinkerbell stretched herself and padded over to Rosie, who was sitting on the end of the bed, legs curled under her. The tabby cat stepped delicately onto her lap and settled one paw on her chest, rubbing her head against Rosie's woolly cardigan. Yes, my angel, what is it? Murmured Rosie, bending her head. Her curly hair settled over the cat's golden fur. Just because they had a horrible time in the last war, declared Tilly, sounding braver than she felt. That's no reason to murder our pets. We've got to hide them, and we've only got tomorrow to decide where and get everything ready. But even if we do find a hiding place, what shall we tell the grown-ups? Rosie's anxious face stared at Tilly, who had crouched down to play with Bonnie's ears. Oh, that's easy, said Tilly. We'll tell them our pets knew that they were going to be killed and they'd run away. For the first time, Rosie's green eyes, almost like her cat's, Tilly often thought, lit up. That's marvellous. That's just what we'll do. And you know what? I've got a perfect idea where we can hide Tinker Bell and Bonnie. Where? Our den in the woods. It just needs a bit fixing up. Find some straw for them to lie on. Make sure they can't escape. What do you think? Tilly leapt to her feet and Bonnie started jumping up to nudge her hand. It's a smashing idea. You're a complete and utter genius, Rosie Wilson. I knew we'd come up with a plan. Now, here's what we do. Straight after breakfast tomorrow, we take the pets to the den. Then we have all day to make them nice and comfy before we have to go home to face the music. I can't wait to see Megan's face when I tell her Tinker Bell has disappeared. Me too, said Tilly. Dad will be furious when I tell him, thought Tilly, pushing out of her lower lip. But I don't care. That'll teach him to even think about killing my darling Bonnie Bonbons.